Hi everyone! I wanted to do a little back exercise tutorial so I can really talk about some of the nitty-gritty details that I would love people to be able to incorporate into their back exercise as they practice. And I wanted to do that here so that I don't have to spend a ton of time in class doing it, so that I'm going to pin it in my profile. You can visit it anytime, and over the weeks as this goes on, we can practice it. You can send me videos and show me the parts that maybe you've improved upon, and we can start adding more and more variations to the back exercise in class. For the whole back exercise, we're really kind of going for a vertical contraction. So when I'm teaching Taylor style class, I sort of separate the contractions into three categories. So one of them is one that we don't do in the back exercise, which is a high contraction. So your pelvis is trying to stay right underneath you and you're only curving the upper part of your back. And this is kind of the opposite of a high release. So same thing, you're trying to keep your pelvis underneath you, which is the hardest part for me. And then you lift your chest up and back behind you without letting your pelvis kind of dump out. So pelvis under you for both the high contraction and a high release. So the second kind of contraction that we use, which is the contraction that gets used most in the back exercise, is what I call a vertical contraction. So your shoulders are trying to stay directly over your hips, which means you really have to make your spine very, very long to get a contraction to come. So I think of sending my belly button back, kind of tucking my pelvis under, and then there's a lot of sort of back and forth tension between maybe my elbow or my hands and my spine pulling behind me. So here's a vertical contraction. And like I said, for Paul's vertical contraction, we often sort of keep our chin pretty level, so you don't want to drop your head. It's even hard for me sometimes not to right at the last second, really get indulgent and drop my head before I go on. But you want to try to keep your chin level and kind of above the contraction. And then the third contraction is a low contraction. To me, it looks a lot like a vertical contraction, but I feel a lot more engagement in my lower abs. So trying to tuck maybe my pelvis almost more under than I would for a vertical contraction, and using a lot more kind of lower ab. It kind of gets more into my quads too. Often we kind of do a gesture that's symbolizing that undercurve when we do a low contraction. So aside from being very clear about that vertical contraction throughout the back exercise, the biggest sort of refinement that I want to see from most people when I'm seeing them practicing the back exercise is the arm path. So your arms have to kind of pass through what I call home base when I'm teaching a lot, and I mean like literally touching your legs. So when we sort of have that neutral stance, your arms do kind of float away from your body. But especially when I'm teaching, I want students to really touch their legs through each of these transitions for the back exercise. So let's go through each position. So the first one is just a vertical contraction. Your arms kind of float up into a first position in front of you. So just like we just demonstrated here. And then when you transition, your spine is what initiates. So I go from a contraction into a release, kind of starting down in my pelvis, and I drive my legs into the ground, come through. This is a neutral kind of position up here, much like the home base down on your thighs with your hands. And then I'm going to try to keep my right hip back as I spiral to the left. So I'm only going to go as far as I can really keep those hips square, especially since this is just the first twist of the exercise. You don't have to get fully to the side of the room, especially if that means that you're sacrificing your pelvis. So you just have to get even to a 45 if that's all you can keep your pelvis nice and still for. And then the contraction is going to be what sort of starts to change your back to spiral to the other side and drives your legs down. This is where it's important for you to really go through the home base with your arms. So you contract, slide out your back foot, the back spiraling keeps turning you, your hands go through this home base, and this one then just stays there in its molded position. This one keeps swiping across. Don't be afraid to touch your body. You might have to disengage a tiny bit to get to the other thigh, and then you're twisting your shoulder blade, your elbow so much that your fingertips point back towards you. And this is where you can really use the resistance of your elbow pulling forward against the resistance of your back to help increase that vertical contraction. So here, again, my chin is gonna stay level, and I'm kind of, this time, trying to get my shoulders more towards the side wall, but my pelvis has gotten to come with me a little bit for this one, but you're still kind of fighting that opposition. And then the release is gonna slide my pelvis across without it going up to come back down. So try to keep it on one level. You really push on that leg that you're gonna end up with straight in the lunge. And you can let these toes come back to face forward. So when I'm done in this next position, ideally, both my toes are facing forward. As I spiral my back, it becomes hard sometimes not to end up losing those toes, but see if you can keep that really true foundation. So the release, my hands drop through that home base again, like really touch your thighs. And then they only come off of my thighs because my back is twisted so much that my arms can't help but rise. And like I said, I'm not even doing a good job right now. Trying to keep those toes forward, keep your pelvis underneath you, and twist, 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 twist. And for this one, you can tip over a little bit so that it's one long line from your heel to your head, and then you're trying to show the audience your back. And your arms are in a V as if you were just standing nice and neutral. So try not to distort the V, really have the spiral come from your ribs, and your V is right where it would have been if you were just facing front. Okay, this next arm path I would say is the most common mistake. So your arms have to move quite a bit faster than the rest of your body, even though I want your back to be the thing that's really making them move. So from the high V, you're still gonna have to drop them all the way down to your thighs before you get onto your lunge on the floor, if you're familiar with the back exercise. Lots of times what I see is people take a shortcut and they just go whoop, right from the high V to right over their head. So make sure that you coordinate everything that's happening in your body. I think this is one of the hardest moments to coordinate in the back exercise. So you're in this nice twisted lunge V, and on top of it, trying not to let your pelvis come up before you go back down. So it's either going sliding across or going down the diagonal. So from this V, let me see if I can set it up really nice and clean for you. It's still hard for me after all these years. So you're gonna contract, drop your hands to touch your thighs, slide your foot back, and it's that same sort of elbow arm path that you did getting into the first lunge. And I would still say this is kind of a vertical contraction. It's just totally horizontal. So kind of similar shape, similar relationship between your shoulders and your hips. And I'll scoot forward. So the back leg, the upstage leg here, is on the walk on your toe. Your knee is down, but it's as long as it can be while still having your toe and your knee down. I'm quite folded in my front hip. And Mr. Taylor could touch practically his elbows in front of him. So that's kind of the sensation that I'm going for. I'm trying so hard to stretch both my elbows that they might touch in front of me. And my fingers are pointing back towards me, just like they did in that first fourth lunge at the beginning of the back exercise. And I'm really trying to increase my contraction all up and down my spine this whole time that I'm down here. So when you transition from this low lunge to the little kneel, again, the pelvis is gonna wanna not come up to go back down. So you're really gonna try to keep the pelvis at whatever level it's at, and it should still be the release, even maybe way down in my sacrum, that sort of starts to send my leg forward. So I'm in a busy, hard contraction, and then the release, ooh, I'm even bad at it, release slides my foot all the way from the back to put it flat on the ground. Keep it pretty close to you. You get to drop this other knee down, this foot's still on the walk, and my butt is really close to my heel. So sometimes I see people a little too high, so you really want to drop down. So you've got 3 points of contact with the floor and your butt is really touching your heel. Your spine is nice and vertical, you're spiraled, and you're in a V. And then you're going to contract to stand up, and again, trying not to come up to go back down to the same shape that we started with, but coming up only as far as you need to kind of slide your feet so that, again, you're really situated right between your legs. Your feet aren't that different from a nice wide second. You get back to the same vertical contraction that you did right at the beginning of the back exercise. Still trying to increase. And then the release drives you to stand on both feet with a nice high V. So that is a lot of details. There's so many details in this exercise. I've been working on it for over 15 years and I still feel like I haven't mastered all the tiny details. So I would love for you all to keep working on it and maybe show me some of your progress. So some of the things are the arm path, really important to bring them down into that home base for all the transitions to really actually touch yourself. The pelvis on the way down, trying to kind of take it. I think there's one time in the back exercise when it kind of goes straight across rather than down. But for the most part, it ping-pongs down. Oh, maybe there are 2 places. I'm going to say there are 2 places where it goes straight across, but never does it go up to go back down. And then on this way up, same thing. So it's either going straight across or kind of up on a diagonal, straight across, up on a diagonal, trying not to come up to settle back down. So that makes it a lot more work in your legs. And the final thing is that nice vertical contraction and keeping your chin a little bit lifted, so not getting too indulgent. So I'm going to start to the other side that I didn't just talk it through. So you're going to contract and release with a spiral and contract and release and contract to the floor, release to the squat, contract, stand up, other side with a release, contract, release, contract, release, contract, release. I'm going to do it once again horizontal so you can really see those wider shapes. So contract, release, contraction starts you into the floor. Release drives your pelvis straight across. Contraction pulls you down into the lunge. Release brings you into the nice squat. Contraction lifts you off your legs. Your hands go through that home base. That's a pretty long path of the transition. And back up to center. Contraction. Release. Contraction pulls you down. Release drives your pelvis across. Contraction pulls you into the lunge. Release into the squat. Contraction.